Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. It's Friday. We made it through another long week, which means we're joined by Tim Miller to sort everything out. Thanks for joining me on for our weekend podcast, Tim.
Morning, Charlie.
Well, can we start off with a soundbite that on Earth 2.0 would really be a big deal, but unfortunately in the world we live in is just the Friday headline?
I would like nothing less.
Yeah, this Jonathan Karl is coming out with a new book, which rather remarkably is just filled with news. I say rather remarkably because you think at this point that we've heard everything, right? That we know everything, which apparently is not true. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But Axios this morning got their hands on some of the audio that Jonathan Karl is going to play. Like many of the other authors, he went down to Mar-a-Lago and had a chance to interview Donald Trump. You know, Trump feels that he can spin all these authors, so he grants them the interview. Have you ever read about this? That he holds court in the lobby of the club. So I mean,
Cougars can come by and pay their respects.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. President, you are looking so good, and you can hear the people in the background and everything. Well, the Jonathan Karl is asking the former president about the hang Mike Pence chance, the fact that the protesters that he launched on the Capitol were calling for the assassination of his own vice president. Here's the way the exchange goes.
Were you worried about him during that siege? Were you worried about his safety?
No, I thought he was well protected, and I had heard that he was in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
No, because I had heard he was in very good shape. But no,
you heard those chants. That was terrible. I mean,
he could have. Well, the people were very angry.
They're saying hang Mike
because
Pence.
it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? Yeah. How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
Common sense, Charlie.
It's common sense. He's asking him, but they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." Yeah. But it's common sense that you're angry about all of this. So, I don't know. Not surprising, outrageous. The fact that here is the man who is still the front runner for the Republican nomination for president, basically saying, yeah, it's common sense to chant hang Mike Pence because the election was stolen and he shouldn't have done this. What?
I have this I have two conflicting emotions that happen in my body when I hear things like this, which is just one is the horror that this person still could be the president again, and that we still have to have him in our lives, and that that this is just still the nightmare that we're all suffering through, and for the sixth year. But I have to fight back just kind of this perverse pleasure at the pain of the Mike Pences of the world, and how much that they have to suffer through this, and that they still have to deal with this and abide him. I mean, you can sense it now after that Youngkin victory. You can kind of sense a 2015 mood again among the Republican political class on the Twitters and the National Review crowd, and it's like, boy, we could really be moving on to DeSantis, and we could be getting all the things we want. We could be overturning Roe versus Wade and not have to deal with this guy anymore. And they were just so close to doing it. Had they scrounged up 10 more votes in the Senate, they could have been done with him. And here he is, unapologetic, 9 months later, about the fact that he sicked a mob that wanted to kill his own vice president. He doesn't care, and these guys, these cowards, all had an opportunity to put the nail in his coffin, and they refused to do it. Now they got all tap dance around him.
Yeah, but they're just waiting for Chris Christie to take him out. Okay, no, I didn't want to trigger you there. We'll come back to all of this. Okay, so on Ron DeSantis, did you see the report from I think it was Politico Playbook that apparently Trump is pressuring Ron DeSantis to say publicly that he would not run against him if he ran. Apparently, DeSantis has told him that in private, but now Trump wants him to say it in public, and he's apparently kind of a little bit pissed off that DeSantis is going around the country and raising money, and some of his loyalists have been showing up at the fundraiser. So a little bit of trouble in paradise there, a little bit of
you always knew once he started flying a little close to the sun there that eventually the arrows were going to come. The thing is, Trump is just such a needy, Edie, and he just is like has this black hole in his heart and just needs to be loved and to be feel strong and tough and whatever all the time. And so like that is what this is about. He has nothing to worry about. I mean, like the idea that Ron DeSantis is going to primary him in any meaningful way is ridiculous. This was like when I wrote this article last week about how Trump is the favorite for 2024. It's because of this reason. It's like, could he be beaten? Maybe, but none of these guys, like Ron DeSantis, does not have the stones to run against him and actually criticize him, right? And there's this like kind of fantasy, I think, National Review world, West Wing notion where somebody runs with like, I agree with Mr. Trump on all the policies, but we just need somebody a little bit more electable. We need, somebody just a little bit younger and a little bit more focused on the future, but he's still great. He's still great, was fully with him on the coup. And it's just like that is not going to happen. Like that is not how primaries work. You can't survive 9 months or 12 months, however long it lasts, of scrutiny underneath the Klieg lights, saying I agree with this guy on everything. It's just you got to go with me because the libs are too triggered by him. Like that just doesn't work.
I see one of the National Review guys was actually tweeting, well, I'm not sure that Trump was really defending the hang Mike Pence chance. He was just doing his normal rant about the election, and then he just continued the rant. No, I'm sorry. That dog's not going to hunt here because
the standard rant about the election 10 months later after it's over, pretending like it was fraudulent, pretending like it was stolen from him by shadowy forces. Just that, and the fact that it was reasonable that people might want to hang his vice president. He's just giving a standard shtick. Why is everybody making such a big deal out of this, Charlie?
This is what's funny. It's like the normally absolutely paranoid, demented, deranged rant is now okay. That's the normal. So let me just read the whole thing. We did a little bit of the cut here. So Jonathan Karl says, were you worried about him during the siege? And he says, no, he was well protected. He was fine. But Karl says, you heard those chants. That was terrible. I mean, and Trump says he could have. Well, the people were very angry, Karl. They were saying, hang Mike Pence. Here's Trump. Because it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress? Now it keeps going. How can you do that? And I'm telling you, 50-50, it's right down the middle for the top constitutional scholars when I speak to them. He's obviously referring to the John Eastman weird, bullshit that the vice president could have overturned. Yeah. Anybody I spoke to, almost all of them at least pretty much agree, and some very much agree with me, because he's referring to Pence, passing on a vote that he knows is fraudulent. How can you pass a vote that you know is fraudulent? Now, when I spoke to him, so he's back, he's back on Pence. I really talked about all the fraudulent things that happened during the election. I didn't talk about the main point, which is the legislatures did not approve 5 states. The legislatures did not approve all of the changes that made the difference between a very easy win for me in the states or a loss that was very close, because the losses were all very close. So, I mean, he's clearly talking about Pence.
The Capitol's being stormed, by the way, while he's doing all that's the other thing. He's like, yeah, I'm talking to Pence. I'm like, this is the easy thing to do is to go with this. It's like, I know that you're being evacuated right now by Secret Service.
So Jonathan Karl has a bunch of stuff. He's got that long piece in the Atlantic about John McEntee, the 29-year-old wonderkind, who was pushing everybody around, including writing this long memo about firing Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense. And Jonathan Karl actually has put out a copy of it. It's really amazing. And what an insight into the Trump White House, what really mattered. I mean, the Trump lists among Esper's sins against Trump that he barred the Confederate flag on military bases. He opposed the president's direction to utilize American forces to put down riots. He focused the department on Russia. He was, and listen to this, actively pushing for diversity and inclusion. So all of these things are among the things that were the sins that Johnny McEntee said, warranted firing the Secretary of Defense, who was in fact fired on November 9th, 2020, a few days after the president was defeated for re-election. So once again, we're getting a little bit more insight into just how warped that White House was.
Yeah, and what they wanted. I mean, again, thank God, that like Milley, who I have plenty of complaints about, and those folks were in there. And you looked at that it was like written on crayon, like the 3-point list of what your instructions was. It was like, get us out of Afghanistan, out of Germany, end Germany war, out of Africa. Like that was the temporary defense secretary's, instructions from this 29-year-old brat. I think that if folks haven't read that Atlantic article, I told Carl this. In some ways, I think it was the best excerpt I've read, or chapter I've read from all of the various Trump books, because
Really?
Because here's why.
That's saying a lot.
We get into all of the craziness with Trump and but like at its heart, this McEntee story is what the administration is all about. And to think about having him come back again, I think it's the most illuminating, because it's just about these petty insecurities of this man. Like Johnny McEntee was a backup quarterback at Connecticut, which is why Trump likes him. He looks the part. He went viral on YouTube for doing some trick throws. That was his claim to fame before he got on the Trump campaign. And he gets into the White House. He gets fired because he fucked up his taxes because of his gambling debts. Okay, and then in the last year, Trump brings this guy back who has no skills, no expertise. He puts him in charge of the biggest HR department, the most important HR department in the entire world, the U.S. government's, and he basically instructs him to sniff out rats. Like the East German Stasi. It was reminiscent of there's this great show called Deutschland. I highly recommend to people. It's like kind of about the East German Stasi, and it's like, sniff out the never Trumper. They're 3.5 years into the administration. They're in the middle of a pandemic. Trump has this 29-year-old frat star trying to sniff out anybody that might have liked a tweet that it wasn't favorable to Trump. He hires a whole new department. There's a 20-year-old girl in it named Cameron something, who is a TikTok star, who's in charge of external affairs for the United States government. He hires a bunch of hot chicks and ugly dudes that he can push around, and then he inserts these people as the White House liaison into the departments, people that are doing work. There's this 25-year-old bro that is acting like he's the boss of the Department of Homeland Security, and he's storming around the Homeland Security Department, bossing around Chad Wolf, who also had no
business being
obligated. You know what I mean? Then it's same thing at the Department of Justice. Why aren't you being asking Bill Barr why he isn't looking into Durham more and all this sort of stuff? If we get Trump back, like the Carl article is the absurd putsch, right? It's both, right? It is both anti-democratic and ridiculous, and it would be that again. And you just have these really absurd characters that are drunk with power within the White House, because that's the kind of person that Trump attracts.
Probably Johnny McEntee would end up being the chief of staff, and Richard Grenell would end up being Secretary of State. We actually should put together what the cabinet would look like. My pillow guy would be Attorney General. Rudy Giuliani would be Attorney General, right? My pillow guy would be Secretary of the Treasury. You laugh now.
Right.
Okay. You laugh because it's so painful now.
These are the people that were left. I mean, we're in the middle of a century-long crisis, and it's Johnny McEntee, the dude who lost all his money playing online poker, a backup college quarterback, who is managing who is getting hired at the FDA and HHS, right? I mean, like this, it's preposterous.
Well, the good news, though, the good news is that coming to the rescue, Chris Christie has decided that he is breaking with Trump.
My friend.
Okay, so is it fair to say that Chris Christie triggers you a little bit? Because
Chris Christie triggers me a lot.
Okay. You're right. You wrote this epic piece in the Bulwark, which I strongly recommend. The biggest bully is a half decade late. Like every other pathetic, podgy, scared, insecure bully who has ever disgraced a schoolyard, Chris Christie, who you refer to as Cartman, talks a big game. But when he was called upon to meet the biggest threat of his life, a doughy, soft-handed trust fund baby with authoritarian aspirations, Christie didn't just walk away from an argument. He waddled as fast as he could go in his urine-soaked pull-ups. And it gets worse, Tim.
It does get worse.
He hurt you as a child. He hurt you, right? I mean, there's something.
He did hurt me. He didn't hurt me as a child. Here's where he hurt me. I can remember where I was, Charlie. I was sitting. I'm forgetting the name of the restaurant. Jeb had just dropped out, No, Jeff hadn't just dropped out. We were in between New Hampshire and South Carolina. We were in between New Hampshire and South Carolina. I flew down to Miami to get my laundry to do one day. I went home, and I was sitting at my smoothie place when I looked at my phone and I saw the news that Christopher Cartman Christie was endorsing Donald Trump for president. And at that moment, I know I was late to the punch on this. But I just, even after Trump had won New Hampshire, I was like, he's still not going to win, right? I mean, like Marco's going to come back, or Cruz. I didn't really think Jeb was going to win, but like Marco or Cruz or somebody, Christie could help somebody actually make sure this freak show doesn't become the nominee. And he was the first one. It was at that moment before New Hampshire, nobody had endorsed Trump. Christie was the first one, and he had this reputation as a moderate, as a guy who tells it like it is, as somebody who's pragmatic. He crossed party lines. He drew a lot of these Trump, but Trump ended up doing very well in blue states, with a Christie type voter. And he kind of put this stamp on approval on Trump and turned him from kind of this ridiculous sideshow that was like, oh my God, we should be getting kind of scared, into somebody that's like, okay, we can work with him. The establishment can work with him. He's actually better than Ted Cruz in some ways, because Ted Cruz, and so
everybody hated him.
Yeah. Christie did that. Christie was the first mover. The first mover in these situations is always critical. And who knows what would have happened if you would have went another way. And to have to listen to this asshole, talk about how he is the one that is willing to tell hard truths, that he is the tough guy, that he is the man who can stand up to those little teachers who ask him tough questions in the town halls, and he's so tough the way he looks down his nose at them. It's just like, fuck you. I'm so sick of him. It would be one thing, Charlie, if he had said, I misjudged this one. I thought we could manage this guy. I knew him a little bit from around New York, and I whiffed. And his behavior after the election is just so horrible that I feel terrible that I went along with it. And like, we got to stop this right now, and I'm going to lead the charge. Okay, I wouldn't be buying any Chris Christie XXL t-shirts to put on, but I would be okay. But that's not what he's doing. He is flattering himself, by saying that like he's the one guy who has the cojones to do this right now, and he's barely doing anything. He gave that whole speech at the Reagan Library where he doesn't mention him. He makes this one sarcastic remark to Mike Allen. It's a kind of a wimpy, backhanded attack on Trump. If he's going to do this, let me see Chris Christie give Donald Trump the treatment that he gave those teachers union teachers. Let me see him give the full, put the full weight of himself behind his attacks on Donald Trump. And then maybe we can talk about something. But in the meantime, he's just playing the press like a fiddle, and Axios and CNN and all these other folks are like, oh, they love the controversy. They're like, we can, get some clicks out of this because our ratings are down because people don't want to watch, hear about the Biff anymore. And it's like, it is just all so phony. And he did hurt me. He hurt me in February of 2016, and I'm still bitter about it. And somebody needs to tell the truth about this.
Listen, I remember that, and you're not overstating the impact. Up until that moment when he endorsed Donald Trump, I don't know of a single major political figure who was supporting Trump. He was
Sessions. If you want to count Sessions,
I was going to say Jeff Sessions would be about the only one, because I remember in Wisconsin, I think the only elected Republican official that was supporting Trump at that time was the village president of Thiensville, Wisconsin, which is like right next door to where I live, which is this tiny little 1 square mile place, and nobody else, absolutely no one else. So when Chris Christie did that, it did kind of break the glass. And then of course he turned from being the fighter to being this shine box, standing looking adoringly up at Trump. So in retrospect, he obviously had decided at some point that he was going to do this because he beat up little Marco at that and really destroyed little Marco during that debate right before New Hampshire. And he tells the story, which you quote in your article, of Trump recounting what happened at the debate when they broke for a commercial. He wrote, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Donald Trump. Donald put his arm around me and said, God, you destroyed him. You're the only one who could have done that. Just remember, I haven't said anything bad about you. Don't go after me. And of course he didn't. He just, killed little Marco.
The whole campaign.
So he was, yeah.
He quit his whole campaign. Like the person best suited to attacking him killed his whole campaign. So, we can do recriminations and counterfactuals on 2016 all day. And I know I sound like, the guy talking about the football game back in high school where if they just made the one pass, they would have, won the state title or whatever. I'm Uncle Rico over here, but still, it's true. And like,
we're both going to be that guy,
Yeah. So, but he has to, do something before you get praise, and everybody needs to recognize like his culpability here, and then just the pathetic toadying nature that he went along with it, and so I can't let him have this little moment that I know that it makes CNN so happy that he can have this, that
all right,
they can have their normal Republican back.
So where do we draw this line? Because we know that there are those of us who were never Trump from the moment he came down the golden escalator. That's fine. But obviously over time there have been other people who have come across the line and that we have welcomed, including Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who might have supported him early on. And we have been, sometimes had to swallow and say, okay, you were there, you were serving during that administration, but you've seen the light, and we will make, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Why shouldn't we get to that point with Chris Christie? Basically say, okay, fuck you for everything you did before, but okay, I'm willing to listen if you're willing to join the militia now.
Yeah. I have a two-part answer to that. Number one is, look, if Chris Christie wants to go full frontal on Donald Trump and run in a primary against him, hell yeah, great. Mm-hmm. Like that's fine with me. I'm not gonna donate to him, but that's great. I hope he does that. I haven't seen any evidence of that right now, and so that's what I'm calling out. I guess my answer to who's welcome is just don't bullshit a bullshitter. Don't bullshit me. Don't look at me in the eyes and tell me that this is your moment of clarity happened in January 6th and now you're the one that wants to step forward because and now you're the one who's going to speak hard truths. Have some contrition. Or at least explain to me, the choices that were made. Look, I think people that served in that administration, so bugs me about the John Kellys, right? And the Madisons, right? If you say, look, I was trying to make a call, I was trying to make a judgment call, and it's if it was going to be me in there or it was going to be Johnny McEntee at the Department of Defense, and it would be better with me, and I thought I could manage them. Turns out I couldn't. We need to stop them. And I'm with all the folks that want to stop them, no matter where they are. Then you're welcome. Then you're welcome into the cause with me. But don't try to paint yourself as some hero and puff yourself up and turn you into the tough guy.
Yeah.
That's the part that bugs me the most about Christie. It's what where I had trouble with the mooch too. You know what I mean? You just give me some.
See, there are some of these guys
straight
that I have
talk.
a hard, right? Okay, so as a kind of a throwaway line, you mentioned that maybe the media is liking this storyline because then they don't have to talk about Biff anymore. Can we talk about Biff for 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so that was a week ago. A week ago today. Actually, it was less than a week ago from when we're talking right now that they passed the Biff. And Democrats are telling one another that if they pass Biff and they pass Build Back Better reconciliation bill, that things are going to be okay for them. What do you think?
I've been critical of the Democrats and the way they've been talking about and acting around all this. I want to note before I get into my criticism that there has been in this week, you've seen a noticeable change. Mm-hmm. Biden is out there selling the infrastructure bill. I guess he's going to sign it on Monday officially. And, the tone, they obviously rushed it through. I think that Virginia was a little bit of a wake up call.
A little bit.
A little bit. The understatement of the year. They're selling it more. And so, things aren't going to change in Biden's approval rating overnight just because you start doing the right thing for 1 week, right? A lot of people just aren't paying that close of attention to all this stuff. And so I see some green shoots. There's not a magic bullet that's going to fix the fact that it grinds people's gears when they, pull into the Chevron and see $4.88 at the, as the gas price or whatever. Their grocery bill's $100 more than it was last year. That bothers people. The only way to fix that is telling folks what you're doing to try to help them, right? And this is where the Democrats have failed. I haven't agreed with every policy they've done, but they at least have a story to tell. You have the child tax credit that was extra money a month. You had the COVID relief money. Now we're doing the infrastructure money that is coming into your communities. Right now, Biden, I'm turning my focus to trying to deal with inflationary pressures in these other ways. Right, that is a combination of things that at least get them into the ballpark, I think, of trying to win people back. We're a long way from November. I think there's reason to believe some of this stuff is temporary. It's going to take some time, though. And so I just think that the key thing for the Democrats is, not making it worse by like arguing over how many trillions. We're getting right back to arguing over how many trillions we're going to spend. That's the first most important thing that they need to do. And two, just demonstrating that like they're part of the solution. So hopefully, presuming like things get better on the inflationary side of things are getting better on the jobs front and the market's doing well and all that. So assuming that it starts to get better next year, they can take some credit for it and have a little bit of wind at their sails going into November. I think it's going to be ugly no matter what next November. That's just the nature of these things. But you can mitigate the pain.
Look, I also think I agree with everything you just said, including the fact that look, they just need to tell that story and tell it over and over and over and over again. Somebody on Twitter saying, "Well, are you saying that the voters are so stupid that they need to be told again and again?" Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, you need to say it over and over and talk about what's in the details, and not necessarily the $1 trillion details, but maybe something real tangible. Because the $1 trillion just mine eyes glaze over. It's just too big. And the reality is the 488 at the gas pump, if that's what it is in California, is a lot more powerful than any of these abstractions. So, but I also think that in Virginia was maybe a wake-up call. The Democrats really do need to come to grips with a number of things. Number one, take inflation seriously. It does seem like the Biden White House might have been in a little bit of a bubble, that they were taken so much by surprise by the amount of inflation. That should be pounded over and over and over again, that this is a huge issue that clouds everything. That's number one. Number two, they're going to also have to figure out a way to talk about race. Yes, there's been a lot of dishonesty about critical race theory, but the reality is that there are people who are really upset about things that are going on in the schools. And you're out in California.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, this is a digression here, but in California, the very, very, very liberal mayor is backing a recall of even more liberal members of the school board in San Francisco. Yeah. Is that right? I mean, that's mind blowing to me.
Yeah. I mean, London Breed's actually pretty, she's liberal for sure, but is practical, the mayor of San Francisco. And yeah, they're not only recalling school board members, but recalling the DA, Chesa. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Boudin,
who's out there.
Yeah, it was like really out there, and he was like he was brought up in the Weather Underground crowd, and his parents were in the Weather Underground, and he basically is like, look, I'm pretty liberal on criminal justice stuff, but I mean, and he doesn't want to have any accountability for like petty crime, and so they're recalling him, and I saw a poll. Somebody sent me a poll. I think it was private, so I won't say who it is. But like, he has this DA has a 52% negative rating in San Francisco, and it's like I don't think any other DA in the country even has 52% name ID. Right? Forget 52% negative rating. And San Francisco is not filled with MAGAs, right? So these are Democrats that know who he is and don't like him. And so, I think that being eyes open to the fact that there are real frustrations with this and kind of bringing things back into reality is good for Democrats. Just one other thing on
crime as well, on crime and schools, I think is the
crime and schools and inflation. And these are the three things that I think have a broad swath of people who were Biden voters concerned right now, and you got to bring those people back into the tent. We're not talking about the MAGAs who are making up crazy, wanting to burn Toni Morrison's book. Like, that person's never coming into the tent. But the people who are Biden voters who are concerned about crime, schools, and prices, they need to be talked to. Lastly, part of talking to them also is telling them what the Republicans are not doing, and I think that. There's good reason on this podcast, on the Bulwark, we have a different obligation. We're not part of the DSCC, right? And so there's good reason for us to focus on January 6th and the threats to our democracy and these existential threats. The Democrats need to do a better job of attacking the Republicans on these kitchen table issues, right? I mean, I saw a poll yesterday that had the Republicans doing 2-1 better than Democrats on how to deal and who's better for dealing with inflation. It's like the Republicans haven't put out any plans for how to deal with inflation. Like, all they've done is talk about how the Democrats are spending too much money and that's going to make things worse. And so I just think that the Democrats, have a clear message here about how Republicans have no agenda. They are standing in the way of any effort that they're putting forth, whether it be the child tax credit, whether it be these infrastructure, though there were some Republicans that voted on it, not that many. In the House, the Republicans tried to kill it. Whether it be whatever items you want to pull out of the BBB, the COVID relief, anything that Democrats are trying to do to help working people, Republicans are standing in the way of it, and they're blocking it, and they're being totally nihilistic about it, and they are offering no proactive proposals of their own, and yet, that message, I think, is getting kind of lost in all of the sort of other complaints which are valid about Republicans. There are plenty of complaints about Republicans out there.
Yeah, I mean, and they need to put a face. I mean, look, if you spend any time on right wing media, you know that the face of the Democratic Party is AOC, right? I mean,
Right,
they will do that. And at some point, Republicans need to be held accountable for the fact that they have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Paul Gosar, et cetera. Those are the public faces. But also, your point about just the kitchen table, and I know you wrote about what a disaster it would be to give up on rural America, and they have a blue collar problem. And they're very clear populist messages that they could use, focusing on jobs, putting people back to work, making us more competitive against China, making corporations and the rich like Donald Trump, billionaires, pay their fair share in taxes. By the way, I cannot believe that they are not pounding away on that particular issue, just from a political point of view. While what are the Republicans doing? They're voting against aid. They're voting against these jobs programs. They're voting and they're obsessing about Big Bird. So they say they're on your side, but what are they really spending their time doing? There ought to be some more focus to this. But I think the Democrats have been too distracted by fighting with one another.
Yeah, and on the places where you hear, people are dumb, but you do have to tell them things. But they do listen. And there's this good New York Times article this morning about how in AOC's districts, people said there's some pushback over her opposing infrastructure because they want the subway fixed in New York, and they want the lead pipes fixed, which are two parts of the BIF. That same model could be there in red America, right out in rural America, and they're getting rural broadband was part of the BIF. Is again, are you going to win over the people that are wearing the MAGA hats and going to the rallies, or who are spending their time reading Newsmax or their Facebook feed? No, you're not going to win those people over. But in all of these communities, there are people that I would be responsive to the message of Republicans just don't want to do anything except for get you riled up about what's on Sesame Street, but they're not trying to help get rural broadband to your neighborhood, get whatever other projects are coming through BIF. People do. There are people in these communities that care about this. And there was a tweet yesterday I saw on my point about the rural America. That one of these counties in Virginia, went from a Bush +4 county in 2004 to a Youngkin +66 county, and Trump had only won by 60. Right, so can you get it from 66 back down to 46 just by talking about how you're trying to provide something in these communities? I think so, but you have to try. You have to do it.
Right,
you can't just do it and hope they realize that it's the Democrats that did it. Right, you have to try to tell them.
Well, you also need to make it very, very clear that you're on their side. There is that sort of disconnect where I think some of the politicians think that, hey, I'm going to go along with regarding you as a white nationalist, as a racist, as a bigot, but would you like to see this white paper I have on taxes? Well, no. At a certain point, if people don't think that you share their values or have respect for them, they're not going to go along with all of that. Okay, one last comment. I think one of the real dangers, and this seems like not to be on a lot of people's radar screen. Well, it should be after Virginia. If Democrats are going to be successful, they're going to need to continue to run up the score among college-educated suburbanites, since they continue to lose ground among blue-collar workers and rural voters, correct? So, but one of the things that really endangers that trend, and we saw this in Virginia, are some of these educational issues that are not directly associated with race or critical race theory. So maybe critical race theory, got a lot of the attention, but I just get the vibe that the the attack on gifted and talented programs, or changing standards in the name of equity, changing grading standards, changing the kinds of requirements for math. All of those things actually hit among college-educated suburban voters in a way that I think that people on the left have underestimated the backlash they're getting.
Yeah, and so I wrote about this in the Red Dog article, and I want to try to
Mhm.
put this into a positive frame for Democrats, because there are a lot of issues that just, even in the Obama era, as recently as that, would have been seen as pretty far left, that I think that they could push forward on and not lose the suburbs at all, right? Like, obviously, identity issues like, gay and trans rights, trans bathrooms, that sort of stuff. But raising the minimum wage, marijuana legalization, universal pre-K, cracking down on payday lenders, right? I'm just kind of looking at this list I put together. There are environmental stuff. There's a ton of progressive priorities they can push forward while recognizing that is going to be fine in step with their new coalition. Maybe somebody might not love every little thing about it, but they'll be fine to go forward on it. There are also some landmines, right? And education is definitely one of them. And you have to keep in mind with your new coalition that I think that the Never Trumpers and the suburban college educated folks have been pretty good about going along with a pretty progressive agenda in the Biden administration, and not saying, well, you need to do what we say, you need to tax cuts for the rich or whatever. You know what I mean? Like all the things you might have thought that these former Republicans would have wanted. But there are some areas that are just going to be a step too far, and I think you saw that with the education stuff in Virginia. And I just, I'm looking at schools right now for Toulouse, and it's surprising. Like, the websites are just so all in on the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. And I don't mind that. Obviously, I want diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I'd also like the forms they send me about what's going to happen in school to talk about like math. Right? Like, we're going to also learn here. And so I think that people are frustrated with that. Now, is that Joe Biden's fault? No. The Democrats should, not be playing into the right's hands on this with what you're saying about the gifted and talented programs and all that.
So how right now is the issue of vaccine mandates playing? I've kind of lost the thread based on the polling for this. I mean, my gut sense is that this might not be a big issue by the time the midterms roll around, but it obviously is a big issue right now. The Republicans are all in pushing back against the vaccine mandates. My position, I think you probably agree, is look, this is what's going to get us through this pandemic. This is going to save people's lives. I am all in favor of this. So how does this play right now?
Yeah, I'm concerned that this might be a JVL is always right moment. I was very pro-mandate. JVL was anti-mandate because of the political backlash. Yeah, he was anti-mandate for the political backlash, not because of his own, ideological views. He didn't think it was a smart political move. And I think some of his concerns are bearing out, right? That there is, just sort of the American individualist ethos that's pushing back by people who got the vet. I think I underestimated this notion that people would get it for themselves and then still bristle at the mandate. Here's where it is working, and the bet that the Biden administration is making. If you look at the polls, the poll I saw yesterday had the number of people who said they're never going to get the vaccine has gone down from pre-mandate, I don't remember the exact number, high 20s, down to 13 now. And so it is having an impact just on number of people getting shots in their arms. There are people that were hesitant, skeptical, even hostile in certain cases to getting the vaccine, who went ahead and did it because their job mandated it. They wanted to go to a football game, whatever. Yeah. So if you're Biden, you're saying the best thing I can do for the midterms to help myself is make sure that all this COVID stuff is in the rear view mirror by the time we get there. Exactly. And so, if we can, twist some arms and, we get some short-term political blowback for long-term, higher vaccine rates, that's maybe a good trade-off. And it's just like, I don't have a crystal ball. We have to come back and do this again next Labor Day and figure out whether that was a good bet or not. But I'm for them, but I think that there are some fair political warning flags that JVL raised in his newsletter this week.
No, I tend to agree with all this. By the way, have you seen the new Mayor Pete movie?
Boy, my friend Liz Smith's going to be mad at me for saying no because she like sent it to me before it's even out.
Okay.
I guess it's out now, and she's the star of the show, I guess. But I've not watched it.
Well, next time we talk, I'd like to get your take.
We'll do a little
take on that.
The mayor.
It looks extremely interesting. Okay, so speaking of JVL, you mentioned him. I think he has a trick question in his newsletter yesterday. I think it's a trick question. Is Dennis Prager stupid or evil?
False binary.
Yeah, okay. It's like, come on now. Well, this is, and I've said this before, this is painful because I do remember when Dennis Prager was a serious guy. That he's a Jewish ethicist who wrote serious books. And in terms of being in talk radio, he was at sort of the opposite end of the spectrum of some of the entertainers out there. And what he has become now it's mind-boggling. And of course, he's referring to this comment where he's raging against the vaccination, saying, "Well, can you imagine what does it actually say? Can you imagine if we had stigmatized, gays and intravenous drug users the way that we had stigmatized the unvaccinated?" It's like, wait, were you not around in the 1980s? I mean, look, Dennis Prager is not a stupid man. He's not a young man. He was there in the 80s. And the idea that during the AIDS epidemic, that there was not a stigma attached to being gay or an intravenous drug use is just, it's not just revisionist history. It's insane. I mean, it's insane amnesia.
It's insane. It's insane. And I don't know any unvaccinated people who, are getting dumped into the river and not having funerals with their families because their families are so ashamed of them. So, I like arguing it on the merits is silly. I feel like maybe I should have suggested. I've like been down a rabbit hole of reading AIDS books recently because I have kind of some guilt as having come out of closet. Not post it. We're not post AIDS. Obviously, people are still getting HIV and AIDS, but after the crisis really had abated, and just sort of reading about what was very recent past. And not kind of realizing and internalizing just the horrors of it. Maybe I'll have Jim put some suggested reading material in the email this afternoon for folks that are interested. But look, the thing that bugs me with this, and is how I circle back to the Christie comment, is like, it is true that the gays, we're doing great right now, Charlie. Mayor Pete won the Iowa caucus. Like we're dominating in the culture and in music and in movies. I mean, gay life has never been better in America. And so I think that there's this desire among Republicans and among conservatives to just completely whitewash like everything that happened and just be like, hey, nothing to worry about with gays now. Like we're all on board. Everything's cool. Now we're focusing on the trans folks. We're worried about that now. And I don't mind people having a change of heart on this. I have my own like guilt over, certain candidates I'd worked for, and their views on gay stuff. And I've written about this. Like changing of heart is good. We want people to change their heart. We wanted people to change their heart on gay rights. We want people to change their heart on Trump. But like to then, once there has been success, to like jump on board the train and be like, yeah, there weren't any problems back there. All things are good. I'm good now. We're doing the Men in Black thing. You don't have to remember everything that I said on my radio show for years, where I was talking about the heteronormative supremacy or whatever Prager used to talk about. It's like, we're welcoming you on the bandwagon. If on the way on the bandwagon, you're giving me a my bad. Right? Yeah. A mea culpa. Like I didn't recognize how bad this was. I didn't recognize, the pain I was causing, and I want forgiveness. I grew up Catholic. I'm all about absolution, but absolution requires acknowledgement of the sin, and I feel like it's not just Prager. It's like a common thing now that all these Republicans just want to like pretend like that never happened again, and it's all good now.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that, in case people missed it, JVL sort of went back to the record when Rush Limbaugh used to make fun of people who died of AIDS. Even Bill Buckley, William F. Buckley Jr., said that everybody detected with AIDS should be tattooed on the upper forearm to protect common needle users, and tattooed on the buttocks. On
the buttocks.
Larry Speaks back in 1982, spokesman for Ronald Reagan, joked about it all. Dennis Prager himself, was talking about, that heterosexual AIDS was, nothing. I mean, this is, I guess that's part of the hysteria. But it's also interesting watching some of the folks who had been incredibly pro-vaccination. I saw one official who'd actually voted for a bill that would have jailed anyone who had tuberculosis refusing to get treatment, now railing against vaccine mandates. It is as if it doesn't matter what I've ever said before about any of these issues. It's all right now. What do I need to say for this news cycle to win this particular skirmish in the culture war? And it has no relationship to any larger principle or to any consistency about what you might have been saying for decades.
I got nothing to add to that, Charlie. Amen. Amen.
Okay, so it is time for the weekend. Thanks for coming back on. I appreciate it very much, Tim, as always.
Anytime, Charlie. See you next time.
And thank you for joining us on today's Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back on Monday, and we'll do this all over again.